Retro.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are sending 2024 out by counting down our top 10 pieces of Star Wars content from the year. But before we dive into that, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
I should have brought my noisemakers and everything. So I'll make some noise by saying we're on Instagram and Facebook, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, this is the line. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The ball's about ready to drop. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So yeah, here we are. 2024 is just about in the rearview mirror. I can't believe it. I cannot believe this is the last episode of the year for us.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I was going through trying to get all the content that we discussed for 2024. It was a big year. We covered a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of stuff that didn't even come out this year, in addition to all this stuff. And that's one of our rules for this top 10. We are only reviewing stuff that came out this year. So if it was content that we covered, say The Phantom Menace, as much as we like that, yes, it was in theaters this year, but it came out in 1999. So it does not make our top 10 for 2024. And in addition to that, it had to be something that we discussed on the show. So for that reason, The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes was not in consideration, as well as many of the Marvel comics, such as the end of the run of Star Wars, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, Bounty Hunters, and others. And we haven't talked about the Battle of Jakku, which has also started that maxi series that's out there. So again, a lot of comics are just not going to be mentioned here, as well as the middle grade books from the High Republic. And yet this is just going to be stuff that we covered on the show. So your list may differ, and we welcome that discussion. But with all of that having been said, let's start the countdown here. Jay, you want to do the honors with what comes in at number 10?
So at number 10, drumroll, is Padawan's Pride, the book by Brian Q. Miller.
Indeed. Yeah. So behind the curtain, what we did is we Jay ranked them, I ranked them, we added our scores together, and whatever came with the lowest score was the top piece, and then on down the list. And you ranked this as 8th for your year, and I ranked it as 13th. So it's a good piece of content. And one of the things that you and I were talking about before we started recording this is there was a lot of good stuff that came out this year. And so I felt bad leaving things off the top 10 list, but not everything could be in it. But what about Padawan's Pride made it into your top 10?
Well, just really quickly, one of the things as far as, the way that I ranked everything overall was just the impact that I feel that it made for me and how memorable it was and what kind of layering it was able to give to my understanding of either a certain character, a storyline, fandom in general. And so that's why I chose Padawan's Pride as part of our top 10 is, we said, is it a necessary story? Maybe not so much, but is it a great story? Yes. Is it memorable for me personally? Yes. And again, it just added another layer to Anakin's character that I felt was just kind of refreshing in a lot of ways. And, we thought that we knew everything about Anakin, and it's not that there was anything necessarily groundbreaking about Anakin's character in this one, but, it did feature him in a different light. And it also gave us a little bit more insight into Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship, which I definitely always appreciate. And it was just such a fun story. I mean, it was all pod racing all the time, and it was just awesome.
Yeah. I thought it was fun too. Again, it was 13th on my list, and I don't want that to come off like as a slight. it was a surprise drop audiobook that we got,
Yeah.
back, how many months ago. I was like, all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is out. Anyone hear
Right.
about this? No, no, we did not. And yeah, I liked it as well. It was fun getting a story from Anakin's Padawanship, for lack of a better description,
Mhm.
when early in the relationship he had with Obi-Wan. I guess I didn't rank it higher, just because maybe I feel a little bit different than you. This is not necessarily something that's seminal to me that I'm going to think about when I'm considering the story of Anakin Skywalker. But still, I enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun discussing it.
Mhm. You did
All
indeed.
right. Well, moving on. Coming in at number 9 is The Acolyte. And Jay, you had this at 11 on your list. I had it as 9 on mine. Quite frankly, I'm surprised I had it ranked as high as I did. This has been one of the more um, there's no consensus on it, I don't think,
Mhm.
amongst fans in here. Some people really loved it, really liked it. I liked it. Yeah, I know you had more problems with it than I did. I wanted to see the story continue, if for no other reason, as they introduced Plagueis, and then they put um, Yoda in the back of his head shot in at the end of the very last episode on this, and I felt like it had some place to go, and it
Mhm.
was this interesting backstory of the Sith that we were getting. But yeah, there was some portrayal issues of the Force and the Jedi and everything else that a lot of people took issue with, which I think were warranted. But yeah, that so again, I'm a little surprised it made the top 10.
Yeah, well, for me, the way that I looked at it, and I'm with you, there's so much awesome print material that was out there between the books, the comics, the audio dramas that we got. And it was really hard to, place this one within all of those. But the reason for me that it made it higher than some of those other stories that we got is just because I appreciated what the show was trying to do. It
Hmm.
did fall short. I feel like in some ways it tried a little too hard to do some things. It did help a little to bridge the gap between, the High Republic and other areas of canon. That's what it was trying to do. Fell a little short of that mark, but there were some excellent lightsaber duels. There were some great characters. I loved Jackie. I loved Kamir. I loved seeing all of that. And, just for the fact that it was a live action show. And, as much as I do appreciate all of the other print material that we got, that was what really elevated it for me is just the fact that, Star Wars live action is Star Wars live action, and
Hmm.
we just don't
Right.
get enough of it. And not to take away from, oh, it's a dime a dozen for some of these other print material things, but that's what really elevated it for me was just the fact that it was the live action show that we got. And there was really some bright spots in it.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, give us the next one on the countdown.
All right, so number 8 comes in Temptation of the Force. So yet another book, and this one was by Tessa Gratton, correct?
Hmm.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
this was a good one, and what I liked about this one is, of course, the romance between Elzar and Avar, but it's still a great story about the struggle against the Nihil, the Storm Wall. It was just a great story overall. It kept my attention, and it was just well paced and very enjoyable, very memorable.
Yeah, I agree. So again, you ranked this one ninth. I
Mhm.
ranked it seventh, which makes it the book I rated the highest on there, which really said something to me because I loved this book. I loved a lot
Mhm.
of the books from especially the High Republic material we got this year. Beyond the romance that you were talking there between Avar and Elzar, we got to come up with a name there. I don't know how that Elvar, but anyways,
Oh, a
couple
shipping
names for
name.
them. Yeah, but I liked Porter Engel's story in that book
Mm,
and
mhm.
his quest, and I liked Avar Chris behind the storm wall, and the inclusion zone and what she was doing. I like the Bells Edifar and Briaga. It did so many great things with so many of the Jedi in this book. Explored Elzar's struggle in a way which was not tiresome for me. And
Right.
then we got Parasanteca and Xylan Graf a little bit more in there after we'd seen them earlier in the middle or the young adult book. And so it had a great cast of characters, and I thought it treated them all very, very well. So I was very excited about that one.
It did.
Okay, coming in at number 7 is another novel. This one by John Jackson Miller, The Living Force. Jay, you had this ranked real high at number 2, and
Mm-hmm.
it came in at number 11 on my list. So I like this book quite a bit. It was fun to see the Jedi Council in action. I liked Depa Balaba having an undercover mission behind the scenes. I liked seeing Mace Windu kind of take charge in an action role as well. It did kind of bog down in the middle for me while a lot of the Jedi were doing some more menial type tasks as they were on this planet trying to get things sorted out. But John Jackson Miller does his research when he comes to write anything, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, or any other franchises that he works in. And he did it here. And I thought he handled all the Jedi well. But, you ranked it too. So how did it end up so high on your list?
I did, yeah, and I'm with you. There was a lot going on in this novel. There was a lot of characters, but John Jackson Miller just did it in such a way that it was just so captivating. And what I loved about this was just getting to revisit kind of what, I would call the movie landscape, quote unquote, of that, the prequel era. And
Mm-hmm.
because it's set that 1 year before The Phantom Menace. And so we get these adventures with Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, the whole Jedi Council. It was just a well-written story with a lot of adventure. I couldn't wait to continue it like every single day, that I got a chance to pick it up or listen to it on audiobook. And the audiobook was so great because of course you get all of the different voices and characters and whatnot, and that were done so well. And the main story vehicle being pirates was a lot of fun. And I just loved some of the focus on some of the individual Jedi Council members, and especially with like Plo Koon and Stacey Tin and their friendship slash relationship with each other. It just was one of the highlights for me. And I just really, really appreciated that. And just getting to see all these others like Kiadi Mundi, Yarrow Poof, Depa Balaba and her adventure, and Evan PL, and and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good book. Very enjoyable, and I hope it's not so long before Jonathan Jackson Miller gets to write another Star Wars novel. But
Mhm.
all right, take us to number 6.
All right, so number 6 is the High Republic Marvel comic series.
Hmm.
Do-do-do-do. And this was by Kevin Scott.
Right, right, and it came in on 6 on both of our lists. So finished 6 overall and 6 on both of our lists. So what about it appealed to you this year?
Well, I have to cheat a little bit and say that this was originally kind of my sort of side companion, if you will, to Tempest Breaker, which will spoiler alert, we'll be talking about. But the reason that I liked it so much is just because we got more of an insight to some of these little side stories that were going on in the High Republic at the time. And I loved seeing Tay Sarek in action. And that was one of my favorite new characters that came out of the High Republic that wasn't really focused on in the books so much, but really shines in the comics. And he's just one that I really latched onto. And then we had, some of the other stories that went along with that as well. And I just thought that they were just captivating and very well written.
Yeah, I agree. I also think one of the things that was great about this, and you and I've talked about a lot in the past, is that with all of these Jedi and the Nile and everything else that's going on in the High Republic, with some of it being in the books, we need the images because at least when it
Yes.
comes to the Star Wars comic, the Darth Vader comic, or whatever it is, we have reference points. We know what those characters look like from the movies. When the High Republic started, we didn't have that type of visual reference stuff other than the concept art that they were putting out there. So to get to see all the people in action on the page is absolutely fantastic. Kevin Scott has quickly become one of my favorite non-on-screen Star Wars creators when it comes down to it. And he's going to make our list again here in a bit. But he just has a knack for telling captivating stories about the Jedi from this time period. And what he did with Keith Turnus and Skier and
Hmm.
Lorna D in
Oh
this
yeah.
comic series was just right up there. He did. It was. I always look forward to getting a new issue from him.
Oh yeah. Well said.
All right. Coming in at number 5 was Tales of the Empire. And Jay, that was 7th on your list. I was expecting to be a little bit
Mhm.
higher just because it featured the fourth sister in the Barra Sophie storyline. Came in 4th on mine. Again, this follows in the footsteps of Tales of the Jedi, and which featured Ahsoka and Count Dooku. And so we got these two characters that had diverging stories. They both got caught up in the Empire's movement, and Morgan Elsbeth fell deeper into the Empire's cause, and Barra Sophia ended up rejecting it and went her own way. And again, just getting Star Wars animated content in that style is always a treat. And again, this was another instance where they kind of announced it and it showed up a couple months later. It wasn't something that we knew was coming for a real long time. And that was a real fun drop. We had a hint that something like this was coming in animation, but we didn't know it was going to be this. We were expecting another season of Tales of the Jedi. But so this was a fun surprise. I really like to see the backstory for Morgan Elsbeth, and I like to see because we'd all been wondering what happened to Barra Sophie. You know, was she the Inquisitor we saw in Ahsoka? You know, was until we saw that Inquisitor get destroyed. But what happened to her all those years? And we finally got the answer. But yeah, number 5 on our list.
Yes, and I know it's surprising, but I can be objective.
Mhm.
But I have to say, I do remember when the teaser for this dropped, and I had so many people reaching out to me going, "Oh my gosh, Jade, have you seen this? The fourth sister is going to be coming on screen in animation." And so, yeah, it was, for my own selfish reasons, I absolutely loved seeing it. But yeah, no, I'm with you. These were great extensions of both Morgan Elsbeth's story from the Ahsoka series as well as the Fourth Sister. Now we know as Lynn Rakish from the Kenobi series, which is always great to see her get more on-screen time because, of course, like I said, I'm a little bit biased and I just love that character. And you alluded to the fact that it did answer some questions for us about what happened to Barriss after the Clone Wars, but it was for me also an excellent view into the making of Inquisitors, and how
Mhm.
Inquisitors were basically made, broken, however you want to call it. And I couldn't even help thinking of the book Rise of the Red Blade by Delilah S. Dawson, which was a last year's book and still rings true to my heart. But again, overall great storytelling. The music was so great. And then, you touched on the animation as well. So
Mhm.
excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so coming in at number 4, and I kind of spoiler alerted this one just a little bit ago, but it is the audio drama by Kevin Scott, Tempest Breaker. So good. So this is the one that just was released recently, and we just broke this one down on the show just a few episodes ago. So this features a full voice cast, excellent performances. I'm such a sucker for audio dramas. You had this one at number 5, and I also had this one at number 5. So just the way that everything else boiled down, it ended up at number 4 on our list. But speaking of the cast, Jessica Almasi definitely stole the show for me as Lorna D. Always love hearing Mark Thompson's voice as Mark Young-Rowe. But again, it was just a great way to feature what happened in the comics, for the first whole part of this audio drama. And that's why, I was saying with the High Republic comics, I kind of linked the two of those together as sort of, the same kind of thing for me. But it was
Mhm.
done in such a way that it was introduced to a different or a wider audience. And, I'll be the first one to admit that I probably wouldn't pick up as many comics as I do, but it's because of our show that I get to do that.
Right.
So, this is one of those kind of things that for someone who maybe isn't into the comics is a great way to introduce them to these stories in such a fun medium. But what do you like about it?
Well, Lorna D in the hands of Kevin Scott is just a fantastic
Oh,
character.
yeah.
I mean, he writes her so well. And then, as you said, the performance that we got for this audio drama it was just outstanding. Just the way that the lines got delivered, just the way she accents things. She adds a twist of humor at the end of sentences, first rate. And just established chemistry with all the characters that Lorna was around. And the thing is, yes, this was tied closely to those 10 issues of the High Republic that were the Phase 3 run, or at least the first part of the Phase 3 run. It's going to pick up again in January. But those were mainly told from Keith Trennis's point of view. This audio drama, for the most part, is told from Lorna D's point of view. And so while,
Mhm.
yeah, we're revisiting some of the same things again, when Lorna wasn't on the panel, she was doing something else. And we're getting that story, which is just
Right.
absolutely incredible. And she's such a complex character and has had such a journey from the moment we got introduced to her in Charles Soule's The Light of the Jedi, the first book in the High Republic, that kicked the whole thing off, to this audio drama, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with her in the future because there are so many possibilities. And one of the best moments of the Star Wars content this year was that climactic scene between her and Marchion at the ballroom.
Oh,
You
for
know,
sure.
that's I loved that scene so much. And I want to get a piece of that concept art. I want to get a copy of that and frame it and put it on the wall because I just thought it was such an excellent scene. The way those two were trading barbs and going back and forth, only for well, I'm not going to spoil it, what happens there in case you haven't listened as well. But it definitely is. It needs to be on your list if you haven't checked it out already.
For sure. And I'll say, if ever there was anything that needed to make the jump into live action, it is definitely Tempest Breaker.
Mm-hmm,
For
mm-hmm.
sure. Lorna
All right.
D.
Number 3 on our list is kind of a cheat, but it was released by Lucasfilm and it's under the Star Wars tab on Disney Plus, or at least it was. And that's music by John Williams, the documentary. And we've talked about this. John Williams is synonymous with Star Wars when it comes down to it. George Lucas called him the secret sauce of Star Wars. Just to go ahead and round out how it ended up on this part of the list, you ranked it number 3 overall. I ranked it number 2. So you can tell we both held this in very high regard.
Mhm.
And I don't typically watch a lot of documentaries. I do like behind the scenes type of stuff, but this one I've got queued up to watch again. And I can't remember which episode we talked about in this, but we combined it with a news episode and we both just gushed about this episode or this documentary for a good 20, 25 minutes. So yeah, I think it's very deserving to be here on the list for 2024. But what did you think?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was such an incredible gift to get. I mean, just the insight into John Williams's life and his work, and we got it on such a scope and a scale, pun intended, that I honestly hadn't expected. And we'd said that we realized how far-reaching a lot of his work was, but oh my gosh, how incredibly diverse everything, his whole life and just his upbringing and everything just was something I hadn't expected, and just gave me such a greater appreciation of his work. And we had said before that it's so wonderful that we are actually getting this while he's still with us, because so many times things like this are done posthumously. And so it's just nice to get it right now. And I'm like you, I'm going to be watching it again.
Yeah, well said. I completely agree.
All right. So, and then next on our list would be our number 2 slot, which is Skeleton Crew, our pirate adventure with Jad, Nanawood, and the kids. So, I had ranked this at number 4 on my list. And Dennis, you had this at number 1. So, that's where it ended up for us at number 2. But it's just, again, we can't say enough about Skeleton Crew. For me, it's just, it brings back the fun of Star Wars with an adventure that I never knew I always needed in my life. And
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before too, that it appeals to older and younger fans. And it's just,
Mhm.
I think it's a great way to introduce Star Wars to the next generation. And I'm always about like the passing of the baton, to the next generation. And I think especially for live action Star Wars, this is a great way to do it. And I'm just loving the Easter eggs as well as the new adventures and all the world building too. So it's just been such a fun ride.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And for the record, this had 5 points, and so did music by John Williams. The reason why this falls into slot number 2 is because it got my first place vote, as
Right.
opposed to a second and third. And I'm with you. I didn't realize how much I needed this type of Star Wars show. And it's a fantastic adventure. We've been talking about this a lot on all of our review episodes, about it carries the spirit of those 80s Amblin Entertainment movies like The Goonies and brings it into Star Wars. And I was apprehensive about this. I remember a few weeks before this started, you and I were just kind of talking about, we're just not feeling it when it comes to Skeleton Crew with what we'd seen. But then all of
Mhm.
a sudden we got those little social media teasers that were 15, 30 seconds each. And that's where we really started to get into this show and get excited for it. But they just grabbed you with the first episode, especially the second one, with the pirate base and everything that was happening there. And then again, you alluded to the mystery with Jadna Wood, and we've also got this mystery of what's going on with their home planet of At-Aten. And they go have fun adventures. It's not so much about destiny as it is about the adventure, and it's doing wonderful things for Star Wars
Mhm.
storytelling. So
Well said. Well said.
All right, that brings us to our number one for 2024, and that would be The Bad Batch Season 3. This finished number one on your list, Jay, and number three on mine, and it could have easily been number one as well. I had a hard time actually ranking my top three between music by John Williams, Skeleton Crew, and Bad Batch because I've enjoyed all three of them so much. But what more is there to say about this show? I mean, it brought to the end the series of, Crosshair, Omega, Wrecker, and Hunter, R.I.P. Tech, who perished at the end of season 2.
Mhm.
But Saj Ventress came back during the season. We had other great appearances. We got all kinds of clone movement going on. We've got all kinds of potential stories they could tell out of the Bad Batch if they wanted to continue the adventures. Same Omega by herself. And it was very hard to say goodbye to that show earlier this year.
Oh, it really was. And, for me, The Bad Batch, it just feels like home. I mean, going back to that original Clone Wars feel, that style of animation, but yet it continued to take that animation style to the next level. It improved so much. And we had talked about like the lighting and the colorization and just the way that everything was presented on screen was so cinematic. And again, just the world building that went along with it. But, it's kind of a natural extension of the Clone Wars, which is always near and dear to so many of our hearts. And I've always had a soft spot for the clones as well. And it's just like, it was like feeling like home. And then you had the music of Kevin Kiner and his sons this time, and just so wonderful. And like you said, there was some great extension of the canon timeline, and there's some places that this could definitely go, for storytelling in the future. And it's just definitely has my heart for sure.
Indeed. All right. Well, we had 15 items that you and I were voting against, and you can tell, like, based on our top 10, that we each had some of those items in the top 10 that fell outside of our individual top 10 lists. But of the other things that were on the list, I want to make mention of Outlaws. It was the only video game that we had in 2025. Now, we didn't do an entire episode devoted to it, but we talked an awful lot about it on our news episode. So I included it in here just so we have video games represented a little bit. We both ranked it 15th.
Mhm.
I don't think you've played it or seen anyone play it, have you?
No, and that's the reason why I ranked it at 15, because I didn't think for me it would be fair to, rank it anywhere else. I've heard some good things about it, and I've seen a lot of references to even the music
Mhm.
being just absolutely wonderful. But yeah, for me, it was just I couldn't really place it anywhere else. I know you've played it though.
Yeah, for a grand total of 3 or 4 hours.
Mhm.
And that spoke volumes to me because normally when I start a Star Wars game, I get obsessed with it and I'm spending all my free time on it. And I I've been busy. I've had a lot of things to do, so I haven't had as much time to devote to video games as I normally would. But I haven't had the pull to go back to this game. And if anything, I think it's mainly the gameplay. The story seemed fine, although it was not completely sucking me in about that. I had to see what came next on this. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of I don't know. It just was not grabbing my attention and keeping me involved.
Mhm.
So I know they've been doing a lot of updates to the game. I've been kind of following that. I know they're releasing some additional content for it, and maybe this will be something I revisit over the course of 2025. But for 2024, it just didn't grab my attention.
Mhm.
So, anything else in the not that was not in our top 10 you want to talk about real quick?
Well, the Phantom Menace 25th anniversary special comic, I really did enjoy that one a lot, and I know that I had ranked it fairly low. I ranked it at 12 because there's just so much other great content. But again, just revisiting that era of the Phantom
Hmm.
Menace and just spotlighting some things from the novelization, I thought that was really great. Just seeing, not to spoil anything, but Anakin with a yellow saber. I mean, come on, from Shmi's visions, and the
Right.
layering of the movie with expanding the story, and just again, just getting more of Anakin's personality. So I really did appreciate that one quite a bit.
Yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed reading it and discussing it with you. It just didn't do enough that was new for me to rank it higher, I think.
That's fair.
Uh, yeah, but it was definitely worth the read. Again, as we were talking about, just about everything that was in the 15 pieces of 2024 content that we discussed on this show was good. Was definitely worth the investment of time. Maybe the notable session I just pointed out of Outlaws. But again, it's video game, and that's investing like 50, 60 hours of time probably to get through all that. Another one for me that I really enjoyed, and it was just because of the hilarity of the whole thing, was the Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy special.
Yeah.
Clearly not canon, but it was in and all the inside jokes that we make about Star Wars, and it came up with all kinds of fun mashups when they redesigned this galaxy and put a whole bunch of fun twists on things by flipping the fates of certain characters. And it's not like it's super long. It's technically, I think, broken up into like 2 parts, but you can watch it in an hour or so. And we had a lot of fun discussing that.
Oh yeah, it's a great little fun, what if, or kind of a multiverse kind of version of Star
Mhm.
Wars. And and I learned a lot of things from it too, just from you playing, putting together so many Legos and just having the lore behind it that I never would have appreciated if it wasn't for you. So I definitely did appreciate that.
Yeah. That came in
So,
13th on our list. It was actually the last one of my top 10 at number 10.
mhm.
Um, any others you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, there's just so many great, books and comics and things out there, but Defy the Storm was another one, the other Tessa Gratton book. I
Mhm.
had it number 10, and then you had it number 12. And what I really liked about this one was just that it was just a great way to push forward some of the types of stories that were going on, and they were trying to figure out, what was going on within the storm wall and the whole technology there. I loved Diva Lompop. We had Jordana Sparkburn, Avon Staros, Vernestra Rowe, trying to find Imri. And then, of course, the romance between Zylan Graff and Kara Santeca. I just love Kara Santeca. I cannot get enough of that character, quite honestly. And so that was one that we said was such a huge undertaking of characters, and it was almost hard to keep track of sometimes, but it was done so well, and I really did love that story.
Yeah. The only other one, and we've basically named basically named everything that was not in our top 10 at this point. But I just want to bring up Tears of the Nameless because it did finish number 8 on my list. Really good book by George Mann. The latest adult novel from the High Republic. It really moved the story forward. Gave us a whole lot of updates on the Blight, what's going on with the Nameless, and everything in there. Really great attention paid to Reese Silas, and then
Mhm.
the other new Padawan that we got introduced in this phase, Amadeo Azazo. So that was definitely worth the time. I had a good conversation with Greg Cass about that because you had to absent yourself from the show for a little bit to take care of
Mhm.
some business. But again, definitely worth the read. So again, my takeaway from this is after having done this list, it was a good year for Star Wars content. I
Yeah, it
would have
was.
loved to have had a movie, and we kind of got one with the really re-release of the Phantom Menace in theaters. So we had that was for a couple weeks that it was back, and so we had an opportunity to go catch that. But a new movie would have been fantastic, and of course that's not happening again until 2026. But hey, maybe we'll get lucky and Revenge of the Sith or something will show up in theaters next year, or The Force
Yeah,
Awakens can get re-released for its 10th anniversary. We'll see.
there you go.
Okay. Well, then, that does it for our look back at the top 10 pieces of Star Wars content for 2024 here on Podcast Stardust. Thank you all for joining us. If you've enjoyed this, then we invite you to subscribe to the podcast so that you can get all of the content we've got coming up in 2025. Jay will be doing her World Between World episodes, rounding up Star Wars fashion and lifestyle products. We'll be breaking down a movie over the course of the year in 10 to 15-minute segments. We'll be announcing that soon, which one we're going to cover. But if you think about it real hard, I bet you can guess. We've also going to be doing some other things like covering Andor Season 2 when it comes out later this spring, and whatever else Star Wars throws our way. There'll be lots of stuff to discuss around Celebration as well, also coming up in April. Lots of content coming from us. So if you haven't done so, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and then you'll be there for all of it as it comes. And once you've done that, we appreciate your ratings and reviews, liking, following, whatever it is that your podcatcher does. That really does help out the show. If you want to find our larger collection of content beyond the 200 to 300 episodes your podcatcher is likely to have, then head over to retrozapp.com where you can find all previous 827 episodes and all the other shows that are on the network, including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dork Lair, Doomcast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and Warp Trails. Jay, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we have set up shop on the internet?
Absolutely. My pleasure as always. So you can find us continuing into 2025 in all the same great places. We are on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. And you can continue to find us at our Pinterest page, all the boards over there as well, and on our 2 YouTube outlets, which is the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And we do have a Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server. So if you'd like to tell us your top 10, or if you'd like to react to anything that we've said, you can hit up the link in our show notes for that. And while you're there, you can check out all of the other Discord rooms for the other RetroZap shows as well. So there's going to be, chances are, something fun to talk about for you. And then one more link that we'd love for you to check out is our TeePublic store. And that is the link to our 7 different show logo designs that we have available on all kinds of gear, from home goods to apparel and everything in between. And all of those purchases do help to support the show. And we definitely appreciate each and every one of those. So once again, that link to TeePublic is in our show notes.
All right. Jay, you want to remind everybody what you got going on in the world of cosplay?
Oh, absolutely. So you, once again, can continue to find me in 2025 at j.snipscosplay on Instagram. And I will be continuing to be Ahsoka, the fourth sister, as well as 2 different versions of Hera, my original concept Mandalorian. And you just never know what you're going to find new for 2025 as well. So once again, j.snipscosplay.
Okay, upcoming on the show on Wednesday, January 1st, 2025. Can't believe it's here. We will be doing our annual Star Wars New Year's resolutions episode. So we're going to be coming with resolutions from some of our favorite Star Wars characters. And then on Friday, we will be discussing the next episode of Skeleton Crew. So thanks for listening to episode 828, Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be